today. Hopefully everybody's having a good day, or this a good 2 days without a video. So I'm just gonna make this video. I forgot what it was actually going to be about, but um, it's just a lot. But grace and peace be multiplied to you, in the love of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all and reign in your hearts. Well, first things first, obviously you need to be adding graces to graces. That's one of the main, people are just flat out ignorant about that. They're just like, well, um, uh, they forget that they're supposed to be adding graces to their graces and grace to grace. But obviously because of that, they're ignorant about it, and so they more or less they heap iniquities to iniquities because they're not really focused or centered on the kingdom of light. So they're like obviously just making this situation a lot bigger than what it actually is. They just look at the sins. They're like, wow, I'm such a sinner. I need help. And they're so focused on that aspect instead of actually focusing on the remedy and focusing on Christ. That there is a cure, and that they can obviously get the help that they need if they would just focus on the graces and adding grace to grace. But something else about Leviathan as well. Leviathan obviously needs to be dethroned. But in my last video, obviously there was some sort of legality, sin, I guess, for Leviathan to actually be able to come inside of my life and cut that little specific piece out that you were going to send the angel that frustrates Leviathan in itself. So obviously God allows these things to happen because he obviously wants you to put more attention on it and to focus more on it. But this is obviously that part was omitted, I guess, or it was just cut off, and so I've mentioned that there's a specific judgment that's actually causing Leviathan to be on this throne and to be enthroned. And so obviously you break the legal grounds up, and all the legal grounds are broken. Now you're obviously able to cast these things out and to bind these things up, and you're able to remove the judgment of Leviathan actually being enthroned. As these things are pretty self-explanatory in the scriptures. You realistically do have to read the scriptures for you to actually be able to recognize and to see that most of these things, if not all of these things, are just cause and effect. The cause would obviously be the rebellion and disobedience of the Israelites, and the effect would be them getting carried away out of Jerusalem and into Babylon to be captives and to serve these individuals. Just like how it's written in the law of Moses, these are curses for disobedience to the law of Moses. So you obviously get these things out of the way. You break all these legal grounds up that is even causing these judgments to obviously happen. The curses that came with the law for the disobedience with the law of Moses and other things like that. And yeah, so basically that's essentially how it works. If there's no legal grounds, obviously you're not going to get punished. You didn't do anything wrong for God to obviously hit you. But this is still about Leviathan being enthroned. I spoke about that. I was talking about how Leviathan in itself was obviously enthroned, but you break up these legal grounds themselves, and automatically, obviously, there's no reason for this being this is just part of your legal grounds. This is just what belongs to you. Nobody can take it away from you unless you're convinced that you can't do it, or you're convinced you don't actually have this authority or these legal grounds and other things like that. But so obviously you've already broken all the legal grounds up, and because you've broken all the legal grounds up, there's no reason for these individuals to say that we have grounds to stay, or for Leviathan himself to obviously say that I have grounds to be on this throne. He doesn't have that ground anymore to actually be able to say that. So obviously he's off his throne, but you're still going to fight just because of the scriptures themselves. So, and you send the angels to obviously frustrate Leviathan and his plans, and you use the tactics to be able to outsmart his plans and his tactics. Obviously, you're relying on Christ's knowledge, and you're not really relying on yourself. So, these things are just pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy to recognize and to see that if there's uh, no legal grounds or no reason for God's judgment to fall in your life, because you're actually walking in grace, you're and growing in grace, and obviously there's no reason. You have no legality to let any of these things inside of your life, but individuals typically are ignorant about that. They're really unaware that they actually did something wrong, or their ancestors obviously did something wrong, or their fathers did something wrong, and because of that, obviously they're paying the consequences for it. So these things are obviously pretty easy to recognize and to know, but I still don't want individuals thinking that it's just going to be you've broken the legal grounds up and now you're free. Well, now you're actually free to cast these things out and to bind these things up and to obviously loose the graces, because now you're able to deliver yourselves from these grounds themselves. But this is just something that was obviously bought with the cross. The cross obviously means that you're 100% forgiven. There's no debt to be paid. And if you were suffering with an ailment or a suffrage for your sin, and you've already been forgiven for your sin, obviously there's no reason for that demon to actually stay inside of your life, because you've already been forgiven. So you've been 100% forgiven. So this means you've been 100% delivered. You obviously have to accept it as truth and loose the graces in, because I already know, and you can't do a single thing by yourself at all. So you're going to have to loose these graces in yourselves and your vessels to actually be able to have this amount of faith to actually be to actually accept it as truth, that 100% forgiveness equals 100% deliverance. But it's all grace, and that's essentially it. But that just applies to that as well. But I was more just talking about Leviathan in itself, just because he's um, obviously you read the scriptures to be able to know. In Isaiah 27, it already says that when God punishes Leviathan, obviously the world returns back. And the Holy Spirit obviously says that I wish I had enemies, I would run through them, and and tear them to pieces. Or if they want to make peace with me, then let them make peace with me, and let them make peace with me. But that's just obviously the consequences for of obviously this being in itself is doing a lot more damage than people think. They think that it's just whatever, and then they're not really able to attribute the reasons why obviously God is punishing them, and they're suffering so much. And obviously Leviathan in itself is one of the main reasons. As I know for a fact, it's one of the main reasons why you won't get your prayers answered, because God is resisting you because of Leviathan. So if you could think about how many times you wanted your prayers answered and you couldn't get it answered because Leviathan tempted you and you fell into sin, then obviously, and you were suffering for such a long time because you weren't really getting an answer or prayer or something like that. It was because of this actual serpent and this actual being. That was the main reason why you weren't obviously getting your prayers answered or heard, because of pride, and you would be resisted. So it's a lot more serious than people think. They think it's just whatever. I won't have to punish. I won't have to suffer the consequences for it. And yet, in this manner, you're suffering the consequences for it. Or you think that once you actually get to that point where you'll know for a fact that you are suffering the consequences for it, then you'll know. But obviously, Leviathan in itself also works very sneakily. He does it in a manner that you obviously are blinded from actually being able to recognize and to see that you actually are suffering because of him. And because he does this, obviously individuals just keep going on about their day when they should really be taking time out of the day to be focused on getting rid of all of Leviathan and ensuring that God is not resisting them anymore. So intercession strategically, obviously that in itself is 100% strategic in itself, as well as just in general intercession for the body of Christ. As now you're obviously removing some of these leviathans and some of these reasons, and more or less they're kind of like roadblocks to them actually having their prayers answered and actually heard. And because of that, obviously, everybody's able to work more efficiently. The body of Christ is able to actually move like a clock and actually function like a clock. But if you don't really have this type of knowledge, or you're ignorant about this type of knowledge, then obviously uh, it's not going to happen. But you just nudge the body of Christ, and you keep nudging them, and you keep nudging them until everyone is interceding for one another, and they just obviously make it into a habit. The habit in itself the individual seriously need to make is to ensure that obviously they're not being cursed while they're sleeping, and as soon as they obviously wake up, to break all these curses up, and then cast these things out, and then bind them and throw them into the abyss, because now you actually have the grounds to be able to get rid of them, because they have absolutely no grounds for them to obviously stay inside of your life. So yeah, these things are pretty easy and self-explanatory, but so intercession strategically, this in itself is 100% strategic. So obviously, when you actually are able to intercede strategically for the body of Christ, everybody's actually able to do the works that were actually created to do, and the works that they're called to do, and they're able to do them more efficiently. And obviously, um, they've been delivered from this Leviathan, and this serpent, and everything is just moving like a clock, and that's the overall goal, I guess I would say, maybe. And because that's just the overall goal, it's just what Christ himself obviously wants. These individuals themselves don't have to know that you're interceding for them, but obviously they'll notice a change in their life, and they'll just attribute it to grace, and they'll just look up and be like, God, I know that was you. But these things are just, they obviously need to have more of an active role. They need to be inquiring of Christ a lot more than they obviously are, because they're heavily ignorant about it, and they're just using these things as like little training wheels. They're not really growing or advancing, and they're not really recognizing what is actually happening, how they actually got delivered, and how they actually got their prayers answered and heard. So this is completely like a baby Christian, where these individuals are still not able to actually eat meat, or they're just obviously on milk, and this is on them. This is their own application. This is their own efforts. Had they been more diligent and consistent in their efforts, and obviously they would have gotten to this point, or to a point where they're actually closer to the truth and closer to this truth, that obviously intercession works. It's the Holy Spirit that is actually interceding for you, just like how it's written in Romans 8. And this is the exact reason why, as individuals are just so ignorant about this, that Leviathan in itself is the reasons why God was resisting their prayers, and they just go on about their day and just not really, and being so careless, to not even bother caring about actually being delivered and getting rid of these things that are even causing God's judgment of them being resisted to fall. So, and they're just like, whatever, I just have to wait until this and that. Although there are certain situations like that, your situation more than likely is not like that. More than likely you fell into sin, and you fell into pride. You have this spirit of pride, and spirits of pride inside of yourself, and Leviathan in itself. And obviously Leviathan is just networking your entire life through it, where he's actually able to network, and he's doing it with the intent of actually you failing and him succeeding. And Christ is obviously sending these tests to ensure that you obviously pass these tests and pass the fires, and that way you actually are able to deliver yourselves from what would be the word? You're actually able to let it go and to finally let go of these sins and these worms of sins that were just plaguing your heart, that were inside of your life, and that you just didn't really equate it. You didn't really see these things as I have to let it go. You more or less just saw these things like when the time is right, the Lord will make it happen. When this was one of those things where Christ himself was actually calling you and demanding that you obviously pray for more than 1 hour, you pray for more than 2 hours, you pray for more than 3 hours, but you were just like, whatever. I don't feel like I don't feel led to pray for that length of time, because I know my walk with Christ and my relationship with Christ is going to save me. Christ does not require me. That's weird. That's a little bit radical. You're more the extremist of Christians, that you really think that you have to do all that, and you're still going to be saved, and you're still saved. You don't have to do all that. You just have to do good works. Obviously, individuals have just heard it all before, but individuals are just so naive and ignorant. And these individuals who just look at you like that are just obviously 100% lukewarm. And that's it, and that's that. There's no amount of grace that could cover the fact that these individuals are lukewarm. If anything, Leviathan in itself is blinding their eyes from actually being able to recognize and to see that they actually are lukewarm. But these individuals have already attained and latched onto their own definition of what makes them saved, what determines if they actually are still saved. It could be as simple as long as they go to church, and as long as they do good works, and as long as they do they attend church, but they're forgetting that Christ is obviously still very much angry with them, and that although he hasn't spit them out of his mouth yet because they're neither hot nor cold, he's still going to spit you out in the end, in the great finale, at the great white throne judgment. So these things are obviously a lot more serious than individuals think. They think that, well, I don't have to do all that, I don't have to do these good works, but right now, currently, you're in Christ's mouth, and he's going to spit you out eventually. So that's something that individuals obviously need to recognize and to hearken to, that eventually, and it is going to come. There's nothing that's going to change Christ whatsoever. He's not going to change. He's not going to give you some special circumstance or some, you have this special relationship that only you. Christ is obviously crystal clear with these things. You're lukewarm. Because you're lukewarm, he's going to spit you out, and that's it. And you're going straight to the lake of fire. Just because you had this knowledge, you should have did a little more with this amount of knowledge, but you obviously didn't do anything with it. You were just like, whatever, I'm here on this earth. Christ hasn't spit me out yet. And even that in itself, obviously you confess it. And then you continue living the same type of life that you obviously are living in until the great white throne judgment, and yet obviously comes into mind, and you're like, well, now he's going to spit me out for real. So this modern Christianity, and just what the world defines as Christianity in itself, is a flat out lie. All of it is lukewarm, and there's just a whole bunch of individuals who are drunk off how much they quote unquote love God, and they're just so enamored and so obsessed with how much they're actually growing in love with Christ, but they haven't really changed. They haven't really put the right foot forward to actually move and get out of that lukewarm approach and how they actually are living their lives. So obviously Christ is requiring from you to obviously pray for more than 3 hours and things like that, but individuals are just like, no, I don't feel like I have to do that, or I don't have time to do that. Man, I'm just gonna be honest. You definitely do have time to do that. If I was working a landscaping job, I was working hard labor, obviously general labor, obviously you get tired with those types of things. I didn't have good shoes, I didn't have good steel-toe shoes to obviously be able to, so that made the job a lot worse. And other things like that. I didn't have a back brace, so obviously these things, my back felt like two rocks grinding up against another, two heavy rocks grinding up against one another. And I will still go home and I will still pray for like 3 hours on. And for you to obviously say and come up with these types of excuses that I don't really have that type of time or things like that is just a flat out lie. And obviously, you would much rather prefer to do the things that you obviously want to do, and that's it. You just have to admit it. You have to be honest with yourself and just be like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. I really don't want to get into that type of lifestyle because I don't feel like it's for me, or whatever reason you're pacified by, or things like that. But this is just it. If you don't want to be a Christian, or you just and this is what obviously falls under the category of being a part of the body of Christ, then I don't think Christianity is for you. In all honesty, Christ definitely does require a lot from you. He wants you to definitely count the cost for your life. As I'm not the only individual in the body of Christ who prays, who speaks in tongues, who does this, who does that, and other things like that. There's definitely other individuals who are doing a lot better than I am doing. So obviously there's some sort of standard that Christ is able to see, just to compare and contrast these things, and just to be able to recognize and to see that why aren't you able to do the amount of works that this individual is doing, and why aren't you able to do, and why aren't you doing more, and just things like that. There's no excuse. There's other individuals in the Middle East who obviously are able to do way more than this and other things like that. And then for you to just sit down and just be like, well, I just don't feel led to, or just other stuff like that. Christ already sees it from a mile away. You're not going to deceive him anytime soon. You're not going to cheat him anytime soon. So you seriously need to reevaluate what you have defined as Christianity. And you seriously need to reevaluate why you think that the action that you obviously do makes you you're still a Christian, and just obviously things like that. So you need to seriously recognize what is. You seriously need to ask these questions to be able to recognize what an actual Christian really is. For you to actually be able to finally get out of that lukewarm lifestyle that you were obviously living in, that you were justifying for so long, just because of a special relationship with Christ, and that you don't have to pray all that much, you don't have to read the Word all that much, you don't even have to. You can read just the New Testament. You don't even have to read the Old Testament, and just all this other flat out obvious lies that individuals obviously believe just because they have itching ears. As that was also a topic that I was going to talk about, how individuals were well, they're just addicted to these itching ears. They want to hear every single thing that they obviously want to hear, and they're not really in it to actually hear the truth. They just want to hear confirmation. That's one of the main things that individuals obviously want. They don't really want to hear the truth. They just want confirmation to know that they actually know the truth. These two are not the same. The devil can confirm many things, and he can counterfeit many confirmations. And obviously, you're going to, because you're already in this way of thinking where you just want to hear, you have itching ears and things like that. Obviously, he's already got you. You already took the bait. You're already a hooked fish to this devil, just because of the itching ears themselves. So you seriously need to humble yourself down and actually recognize and to see that these things in themselves, you're seriously going to have to sacrifice a lot more than you obviously think. You don't think you're going to have to do this or that, or you don't have to go through this because I'm not at that level yet. You're obviously acting a lot more foolish than you think. Had you obviously just pondered it and thought ahead and just have been more prudent, then obviously you wouldn't even have to suffer and go through all these things that are just 100% avoidable. But because you want to learn the hard way and you don't want to receive correction, then obviously you're going to fall. And obviously these things themselves are going to hurt a little bit, and you're going to have to learn the hard way in a difficult manner, just because you're not at that level yet, or some things like that. The enemy doesn't see it like that. These witches don't see it like that. These Satanists don't see it like that. anywhere in any place where you're not fighting, obviously to them is a gold mine. To them, they struck gold, and that is one of the main places that they obviously are prospering in, and they obviously can prosper in, because now they obviously work to ensure that they could curse you, because now they have to break these curses up, and they have the grounds to stay, and then you're trying to get rid of it. You're like, I can't get rid of it. Why can't I get rid of it? And they obviously have been doing that work for a while, or maybe not even that long a time. But these things are just self-explanatory. Whenever you are praying, bind and loose everything and what is hidden coming your way. This will reveal all demonic activity coming at you, trying to stop you from having your prayers heard, and obviously God having resisting you. So apply these principles to ensure you are able to milk the most of your opportunities on earth and stop justifying the activity of demons as the economy being rough. Now, that in itself was just a little explanation. That was just a little example for you to actually be able to recognize, and for you to actually be able to open your eyes to be able to see that some of these things, just because you're a spiritual being in itself, obviously you're going to, these things have spiritual reasons as to why you're broke, why you're homeless, why you can't get a job, and other things like that, just because you're a spiritual being in itself. So these things are just pretty easy and self-explanatory for you to actually be able to recognize and to see that that you need to really look at these things for what they actually are and really attack the root cause of why these things are, and just realistically just manning up and just recognizing that you are a spiritual being, and obviously these your actions obviously do have consequences for these sins, and obviously your sins of the fathers and other things like that play a role in it as well. But the spiritual being in itself, you really need to address these situations according to that principle in itself, because you're actually, well, you're already pacified. This is what the devil himself loves. He loves the fact that you're obviously not fighting back. And more or less, you're convinced that there's absolutely no legality for this devil to obviously be inside of your life, and other things like that. So, but you're convinced that you're not even innocent, or it's not even demonic, and the problem isn't demonic in itself. So, but I was just saying, if you just bind and loose everything right now, even just right now, automatically you'll feel something obviously changing. And so that exposes all the demonic activity that was just there. More or less, you have some sort of iniquity in your life that is just causing this, causing you to just let these things linger around and not really attacking these things, or not really fighting everything and anything that obviously comes your way. So these things are pretty easy and self-explanatory for you to be able to recognize and to see, especially just by actually you testing it out, and you just actually trying it and experimenting to see if these things are actually true and taking action. As that in itself is obviously going to expose the fact that that it actually is happening, and other things like that. If you address the situations accordingly, to you being a spiritual being, and the unconfessed sins of the fathers is a reason why, or another spiritual reason, you will never get delivered. I meant to say that if you don't address the situations accordingly to you being a spiritual, you're obviously never going to be delivered. So some of these situations have not even happened, like being homeless, but the devil is already doing that work in your life, compromise after compromise. So people think that if they don't admit what they are going through is demonic, that you won't have to go through it, and God will continue to give you graces to prevent that from happening if you just act dumb. But it's still in your life, but now it is laying low, and you think God gave you the graces, but he actually didn't. So this is many individuals' this problem. They just live in denial about these things. They're like, well, maybe if I don't act like I know that the demon, but they say this in a subtle manner. They're like, well, maybe if I don't act like this or that, then I won't have to get into trouble, I just continue acting dumb, and God is still going to continue giving me graces, and I could avoid the confrontations and the whole situations entirely. They have already attested and attained that this is actually true. And because of that, they just live in denial, and they're like, well, once I actually get to that point where I actually have the faith to be able to fight it, then I'll be able to fight it. But until then, God himself is obviously going to give me the graces. It doesn't even work like that whatsoever. This is the exact same principle and concept of you being too scared to actually hit the enemy back. And it wasn't until I actually began hitting the enemy back that my life actually began getting better, and things like that. Whereas in the past, obviously, I was more or less scared of the situation getting worse. I didn't fight back, but this in itself was obviously 100% the reason why my life was so bad, and it was obviously getting worse, and things like that. It's because I had to fight everything and anything. And obviously, you really need to be attacking the bigger battles. And even if you think you still are attacking the bigger battles, to continue attacking and fighting the bigger battles and bigger ones than those. So you made the problem worse than if you just would have fought in this principle and in this ideology and this way of thinking. You 100% made the problem 10 times worse. Because now you're actually playing dumb. I'm sure that's a sin in itself. And obviously now you're getting rebuked. These are two demons already. They're obviously, you just keep piling these demons up one upon another, and you're just making their work a lot easier. So fight, and just fight. And loose the graces of knowledge to know what sins to be delivered from current rebukes, to know what sins are to be delivered from current rebukes, and prevent future rebukes, and think ahead. So yeah, you're going to have to loose those graces up inside of your vessel to ensure that you actually aren't defining sin anymore. You're letting Christ define it. You don't have to necessarily know these graces of knowledge are obviously going to be preserving you from your own definitions of sin and other things like that. And then finally, when you actually are able to recognize and able to see that when you're in heaven or something along those lines, or maybe thinking back, or the situation actually comes up and you're like, wow, this stuff really is working, and obviously you're going to know. But or maybe you actually are delivered, or you're getting delivered from the rebukes. You don't have as many rebukes as you used to have, and other demonic problems, and you're more sanctifying yourselves, and you're obviously dwindling the numbers of demonic infestations that you were infested with as individuals. Is have nests on their hair, nests on their body, nests on their heart, nests everywhere on their body, wherever the devil can obviously can do an evil work in you. That obviously, that in the same manner where God sees an individual where he's actually able to use a person to actually do all good works, the devil does the same thing. He can see another individual who, in the manner how they could obviously function in more efficiently to obviously prosper their wickedness and their evil itself. So hate the fact that they're controlling you in ignorance, and don't let them, and give it to Christ. And address the entire list of sins that Christ wants you to let go. Your list is a lot longer than you think. Everyone must be delivered from themselves and their heart and minds. So getting worse and aging should be a red flag that you let legality in, as you're supposed to be adding graces to graces and graces to graces. Adding graces to graces is not the same as aging, but it is God's way, so you must think ahead. When you begin actually aging, now I'm talking about aging where individuals begin looking old. Now I'm not speaking about maturing or growing up. Now, these two are two different things. One is grace and one is rebukes. When you actually begin aging, you're actually getting worse. You're getting decrepit and other things like that. That means that you let legality in some place. And you need to stop defining sin. You need to address the entire list of your sins, and that your list of sins is a lot longer than you think. And you seriously need to let all of this stuff go. Adding graces to graces is not the same as aging, but it is God's way. So you must think ahead. You must be growing in grace and in wisdom as you grow up. You're not supposed to be growing and heaping iniquities upon iniquities because this is just life. I ended up slipping up and other things like that. Christ himself obviously wants you being perfect. He wants you to obviously be a lot more disciplined. And he doesn't want you thinking at all ever that sin is just going to be a part of your life and this is just my life that I actually have to live in. Although you have come to knowledge and you understand that your life, obviously you may or may not fall into sin. This does not mean you should take that approach whatsoever, that sin is just going to be a part of your lifestyle, because now you are pacified, you're more or less discouraged, and now you're just going to be inviting, you're not really going to be holding yourself accountable to the things and to these sins themselves, because you already have admitted defeat and you're just like, well, whatever. I don't, if I sin next time, God's great. God already knows that I'm going to sin next time, things like that. So that is one of the errors that have crept in man's mind and heart, where they think it's just going to be a part of their lifestyle. It is not, and if you just have let that way of thinking go, you probably would have been a lot more better off. So you should just add graces to graces and just be centered and recognize all the graces that you obviously have. That way you could keep adding graces to graces, because it is God's way. The world is just heaping iniquity upon iniquity to itself, and just because they think sin is just going to be a part of their lifestyle. As individuals think it's 3 or 4 demons, but in reality it's like 6,000. What does this expose? That you must judge these situations according to the truth of what it is. Some individuals have nests. You're a saint, but you don't obey the law of Moses. So you were cursed just for not obeying. That's 613 sins, and these 613 sins branch off to thousands for each one. But you're right, you don't have to obey, because sin is no longer sin. How foolish. And that was just for individuals who just don't actually obey the law of Moses in itself. They have literal legions inside of their vessel, because for every one of these sins that they disobeyed, obviously the legality for these devils themselves, and these sins in themselves branch off into more sins. If the virtues themselves obviously branch off from actually obeying Christ, and you actually produce fruit of your own, just like how it's written in the scriptures, by you actually being obedient to Christ himself, obviously the same applies to the iniquities themselves. And these 613 sins and like 200 sins of not obeying the commandments of Jesus Christ themselves obviously branch off to more and more and more, until finally you're just obviously so lost. And then these individuals who are in the Christian church, they don't think that they have legions inside of them. They think they have like 7 or 6 or something a lot more innocent and a lot more pure like that. But obviously, even for every negative thought that you have against another individual, that's a sin in itself. Whenever you think negatively towards somebody, or you just say this about this individual, or you start complaining, a complaint in itself is a sin. A murmur in itself is a sin as well. You're not allowed to murmur, you're not allowed to complain. And obviously individuals just typically get in this way of thinking where they're just like, man, they just start complaining and things like that, or they just start murmuring and other things like that. But these are sins in itself, and you need to discipline yourself a lot more. And that way you're not actually falling into these sins. You're not a complainer, you're not a murmurer. I know I was suffering the consequences for another individual's ungratefulness and just complaining and negative attitude. And because of that, obviously I was getting punished until this individual actually ended up repenting and started acting right. This is when the judgments were actually leaving me. So it was just weird that this is not, that this stuff is actually true, and it actually does connect to one another. How another individual's actions and their own complaining and this and murmuring this obviously affects you as well. So just cut that cord off and those sins off to ensure that nobody can obviously do this to you. Nobody can that their own sins are not affecting you whatsoever in any way. And just because, for what? But some individuals just have this inside of their minds, inside of their hearts, their will, their soul, and their emotions, as well as just on their body as well. So I know individuals want to think that it's just 3 or 4 or things like that, but if you just cast out the legions that are inside of you, automatically you're going to end up delivering yourself. And obviously you casted out legions, so obviously if you casted out legions, you actually casted them, all 6,000 of them out. So these things in themselves are obviously a lot closer. You have to seriously just humble yourself down and be able to recognize and admit that you probably have more than 3 or 4. You probably have like 120,000 demons, and then these things just keep piling up, and you think that because you're fine and everything is fine, that you're not going into torment, or you're not like this, or you're not like that, then obviously you don't have that many, or just things like that. But the devil is still very crafty. He knows how to obviously pacify you. All these other all these other human beings who are walking on the face of this earth, obviously, who have never heard the gospel, have never saved themselves, who have never even delivered themselves. Not that you can save yourself, but who have never even bothered taking the gospel in itself. These individuals are 100% infested with demons, and obviously God doesn't really rebuke them whatsoever, because they're not really his kids, so it's not that he cares. Obviously, he's after his lost sheep, but these individuals are not better off just because you think that. Obviously, all of these demons and all these legions themselves are keeping their eyes blinded to it. The fact that they actually can get delivered, and they need to get delivered, and that they need to get saved from the lake of fire. And finally, obviously, they will continue this. They continue this demonic yoke until finally they end up burning in the lake of fire, and it's just like, well, whatever. The legions obviously did do a lot more harm, and they obviously did end up getting their what they obviously wanted. They continue to obviously let this person be blind until finally they ended up dying, and that was their overall goal, and that was what they obviously wanted. So obviously these people are not better off if they're going to go to the lake of fire, because they're blinded by all 120,000 demons and legions. So count the cost and deliver yourselves, just because even these Christians themselves, like I was mentioning, they have legions, and that is even causing them to actually think that they're not lukewarm, until finally, obviously, the finale, where they finally go at the great white throne judgment, and they're finally spat out, just like Christ himself stated, and said that he was going to spit you out for being lukewarm. He didn't say, I might give you a special circumstance, or I might not, or other things like that. Christ himself was crystal clear. He said he's going to spit you out. So all these things are a lot more easier to be able to see at face value, but for you to actually be able to recognize and to say that, yeah, I need help, or this message is about me, is a whole another story for many of you individuals. Is some of you just refuse to believe that you could be imperfect, or that, how could you say such a thing? I have a relationship with Christ. He knows my heart. He knows my relationship and other things like that, but you obviously don't know Scripture, and he's going to spit you out when everything is all said and done. So you really have to count the cost, and you really have to recognize and be able to see that you're not as saved as you think. The fiery darts you learn will give you lifelong problems, even if you learn them at a young age. You begin to be rebuked, and you notice discomfort, but it is a sin. And you watched movies, and because you were barely growing, you didn't really know how to cope with these situations in a healthy manner. And so people begin practicing these fiery darts that are abominations to Christ for the rest of their life, and stay locked in depression or something else, because they use the same strategies for different emotions like anger, not just sadness, because of their own philosophy. And because you have seen plenty of people who have acted like that and nothing really happened to them, everything will be okay. But everyone, in all honesty, reacts differently to literally everything. and everyone just reacts differently to everything. And you're not Steve, you're not Bob, you're not Angel either. So these things are just realistically simple to recognize and to see that because everybody does react differently. You're not going to be that one person that passes every single test or whatever it is that you may think. You're not going to pass that test, or you're not going to be the one person who evades God's wrath and judgment for the obvious sins that you're obviously falling into. So these things are just pretty easy and self-explanatory to be able to recognize and to see, but for you to actually accept that you live in that way in some way, shape, or form, in that way of thinking, is just something else entirely. So you seriously really need to, what would be the word? You really need to look at yourself with honest eyes and stop justifying yourself so much, because it's obviously destroying you and it's killing you. So you need to seriously cut it out, and you need to stop it 100%, because it's you justifying yourself is the main reason why you're going to end up going into the lake of fire. You justifying yourself is the main reason why you're going to go into torment. You justifying your destructive patterns and behaviors is going to be the reasons why these demonic presences stay and remain inside of your life. And you just look at other individuals, you compare and contrast yourself, and you're just like, oh, well, nothing really happens to them, so I feel like if I continue cursing, foul-mouthed, and other things like that, then everything should be fine. But that's a flat-out lie. You realistically should always choose the good path, and you should always choose the good way, instead of obviously being thinking that that everything's going to be fine. I just did this and I just did that. You don't know when the next time you sin could be your last. So some people just want to be encouraged to continue in their destructive behaviors because they believe they are right, and so get mad when someone tells them it's not that serious and you're overreacting. Or suicide is never an option, but people want them to throw them a pity party but personify what you want or are going through. And that's just crazy in itself. Some people don't actually want to get better. They just want individuals to continue encouraging their own destructive behaviors and patterns themselves. And that happens to be one of the main reasons why I spoke about this in the past, how individuals typically, they want individuals to continue justifying them, to continue encouraging their behaviors, to continue encouraging them to be sad and other things like that. And they don't actually want to get better whatsoever. They just want individuals to continue encouraging their own destructive patterns and behaviors. Yeah, some people don't actually want to get better. They just want someone to actually tell them that they're in the right and that everything is fine. And even if somebody tells them to stop, you're overreacting, but they're not meaning it in the same manner, or in a manner where they're just like, oh, in the same manner how these individuals just think, they just want them to seriously just cut it out. They get mad, and they don't want to hear it, and that's essentially the whole issue. They just don't want to hear individuals who are trying to get them out of that way of thinking. So these individuals are obviously under a demonic oppression where, and they're in an oppressive state where this demon was whispering these things. Had these individuals obviously seen the demon itself that is telling them this stuff, that is that is the reason why they're wanting to be encouraged to think they're right, and and the reason why they're getting mad is because the demon itself is stirring them up. Obviously, they would just look at it for what it actually was, and they'll just be like, yeah, no, as I see what's going on. But because you're not actually able to see inside of the spiritual realm, you're not actually able to see the demons that come inside of your life. these things obviously happen. So you end up falling for it. So that's something else in itself that you should be able to recognize and to see that you should obviously be putting these things to practice. You need to really, when these situations obviously do happen, you need to be able to recognize and to see that there's a demon right next to you telling you these things and whispering these things in your ear. That way you don't end up falling victim to the devil's traps. You don't end up falling victim to just the foolishness that the devils themselves obviously say to try to convince you that it's your voice and to try to convince you to end up killing yourself, or to try to convince you to obviously being able to be used by the kingdom of darkness and for the kingdom of darkness because of legal grounds and your own ignorance in itself, that you're not actually able to see the demon itself. You should obviously hate the fact that these individuals are controlling you in ignorance. You don't let normal human beings control you like this, in this manner, but yet you let these demons 100% control you, maneuver you, manipulate you with no problem whatsoever. I don't understand the logic. I don't understand how you could be in that way of thinking, how you're so strong and you're so bold to not let another human being, but let it be a demon. And obviously you individuals are, yeah, go ahead, come inside of my life, and other things like that. And it's just, obviously on your end, you're a lot more foolish than you think. And you're just very just stupid, and other things like that. You're not at all supposed to be letting these demons themselves obviously control you or manipulate you. You should obviously 100% hate that they're obviously doing that to you right now in some way, shape, or form. No, the only thing that could possibly pose a threat from you actually not being delivered from this is it's not demonic, or just things like that. And obviously it is demonic. You need to seriously look at the entire list of ways, and obviously this list is going to be very long for some of you individuals, of where the devil's controlling you and manipulating you for his agenda and for his purpose. And you have to judge these situations accordingly and not really justify yourself at all. It is just pretty mind-blowing how individuals are just so, oh man, I can't do that. I can't let Bob do this to me. What? How am I supposed to let him manipulate me? Bob? Bob can manipulate his own kid, and he can't even control his own kid. Other things like that. And obviously these things are a lot more serious than people think. But they just attribute it to the spiritual. It's just like, oh, this spiritual. They don't really apply the first 7 principles to the second heaven, and they think that they have to go through hoops. They have to put this in a legalistic box because it's spiritual. And no, realistically, if you interact with some of these demons, they'll straight up leave. They could talk to you. They've talked to you. I've talked to them. Some of them have been really scared, where they would just flat out tell me, yes, you just have to get the legal grounds out, and then we'll leave 100%. And they were just scared. They were more or less anxious. They were ready to leave, and so yeah, they ended up leaving. Had you actually seen the demon that tempted you before any ailment like cancer would have happened, you would have never fallen for it. So that's pretty crazy in itself, just because this is the exact reason why individuals actually ended up falling into the sin that gives them cancer, is because they didn't. It's because it's all demonic. So they didn't really see this demon in itself in the second heaven, and because they didn't see the demon, obviously they fell straight for the trap of the devil, and now these individuals have cancer. So this is a practice that you should obviously be more. You should be practicing more in, where you actually are able to recognize and to see that there's demonic beings coming around you, and even that in itself should automatically expose that they shouldn't even be doing that to begin with. You don't let individuals just creep on you on a daily basis, but because of this and because of that, you let these things near you. But for someone who has kept God out of everything, it is a lot harder to get them to believe these things as truth, as well as people are naive of this secular lie, and everyone who is a part of it is also in on it and knows that God actually exists. but they want to continue pushing the lie only to destroy souls. So this is something that people are ignorant about. They're ignorant that individuals who are in the secular life, who are pushing the secular life, they already know that God exists, but they're obviously not pushing you towards this individual. They're trying to push you towards Satan himself, a moral God, and other things like that to obviously be able to destroy your soul. So they'll offer some sort of moral compass or moral integrity or uprightness, like, oh, you can't be violent at all times. You can't hit Bob or you can't hit Steve in the face and other things like that. But obviously this is just a means to obviously be able to pacify you, for you to actually hold on to this faith and to latch onto this faith as 100% truth. And that's all it realistically is. But all of them are in on it. They know the real God. They know the God of the Jews, the God of the God of Israel, and the God of the Israelites themselves. And they know He doesn't change and other things like that. So everything automatically is just obviously open and exposed. The secular lie, Hollywood, the Grammys, and other things like that. These things in themselves are obviously all politics and the political aspect of things, and every single nation and other things like that. All of it is 100% exposed, but people are just naive and they think that these individuals are truly trying to help them out, but they're truly trying to curse them. Everything is networked in the secular lie that is keeping God out, but it is really happening. If you continue giving these spiritual situations carnal reasons, you will never get better, because you are not addressing these situations according to what is actually happening. Life in heaven and interacting with everyone on earth should be the same, but Leviathan and other legal grounds is a reason why it isn't. They have accepted the wrong theology and philosophy and threw fiery darts that appeal to their flesh. Whenever you take credit for a gift like a fast metabolism or whatever, you'll go limp and lose your gift that was a grace. And just admit that every one of your gifts and graces themselves are 100% grace in Christ. But I was just talking about how you were interceding strategically for everyone that you were going to interact with for that specific day. So, this is exactly why you actually have problems. People want to run you over. People want to fight you. People cause all this trouble inside of your life because they've accepted some sort of fiery dart a long time ago. Continues to encourage them to be able to, what would be the word? To obviously be able to kill you. So these things are pretty easy to recognize and to see, but that it works. Intercession works, but Leviathan is the reason. Other legal grounds themselves and their general means of actually being encouraged to believe that what they actually know is truth are the reasons why. There's only one truth, is Jesus Christ, and that's it. But individuals attest to another truth, and this is why individuals get murdered. This is why individuals die. At no time has Christ ever commanded us to ever murder anyone. Witches are a different story. It says don't suffer them to live. That means that if you're going through witchcraft and other things like that, or witches are working inside of your life, you don't have to let them live whatsoever. You don't have to suffer it at all. So you obviously just killed all the witches that are doing witchcraft inside of your life because you don't have to suffer them to live. If you want to continue letting them live, that's on your own judgment and that's on you, but you obviously don't have to suffer them whatsoever. You don't have to suffer it for the moment. You could just kill them all. Intercession strategically to actually be able to kill them as well is needed, as they already put legal grounds inside of your life to ensure that God resists you and other things like that. They're not actually able to die. So this is a lot more serious than people think. You seriously need to be thinking ahead of time, as the devil is directing the steps of the individuals who you're going to interact with for that day. And because he's directing these individuals' in steps, he's controlling them, he's using them in ignorance or just voluntarily. Life in heaven and life on earth should be the same, with interacting with everyone. But Leviathan is the reason why it's not, as individuals are proud and other things like that. The devil is obviously able to use this individual as he has grounds to actually be in the side of this person, because they already believe that what they actually are doing is correct and is truth and things like that. But because of that, it's pretty easy and simple to be able to recognize and to see that you need to intercede strategically for them. And for the individuals who you're going to interact with for the day, you need to nurse the body of Christ as well to ensure that these individuals are doing the same for their life. The judgments for disobedience are beasts who are God's sword to punish, like Israelites who got taken out of Jerusalem, like Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar. So we ourselves have given these entities authority through our own disobedience, which brought legal grounds and other grounds. No legal grounds, but in this case, no rebelling against God, no judgment of being carried away captive to be punished for being disobedient. But you can apply it to Babylon and the media, modern Christianity, false prophets, and the prosperity gospel, which all belongs to Babylon. The secular lie with it, the beast of Revelations 13, Jezebel, Leviathan, Cancer, and Satan in general, causing him not to be bound up for the 1,000 years already. That is a blessing in itself for him to obviously be bound up. That's 100% of judgment. That the devil isn't bound up already. If you break up all those legal grounds, you can bind all those demons up and send enough legions that were directing his freedom and other things like that. And then obviously it's going to be done. You lose enough legions to obviously get the job done. But you must pray until the work is done. There was a time these abominations did not exist, and there was a time where these abominations were not as bold as they are now in these days. I could just give a simple example of homosexuality. There was a time where that wasn't as accepted, and it wasn't just as bold as individuals are seeing it play out in front of our eyes, where they even teach it, and they want to teach it in class and in school. Which is just obviously all of it is 100% a flat out lie. These individuals are all in on it, and these individuals who are in on it clearly a lot more evil and are as evil as they appear. When you intercede, you begin to make more room for reinforcements as the judgments causing the body of Christ are interceded for, and the kingdom of darkness begins falling like dominoes, as well as getting Leviathan off of his throne, because judgment was there for legal grounds. And get one man who is responsible and leave his sheep alone. As the media, which is a prince, is withstanding the holy angels. But you could just send more and more legions and reinforcements to ensure that they're obviously finally removed and taken out of the way. Just because the entire host of heaven itself is obviously fighting against the kingdom of darkness on the face of this earth. Lose the graces to be able to do this work, or you'll get nowhere. Stop taking their word that they should be doing anything evil, and ask Christ and let him be your strength. Destroy Leviathan's throne. Break his crown. The kingdom of darkness feels like it's a victory when children get molested, but the kingdom of light feels like it's a victory when they get hindered and bound from actually being able to molest kids and from actually being able to do this. So these individuals are 100% just flat out evil, and obviously your legal grounds are to dethrone Jezebel, Leviathan, Babylon, the prince of immorality. The pedophilia is under his command, and the big and powerful creatures you do not know of, to finally bind them and get them out of the way entirely and into the abyss reserved for judgment with everlasting chains. There are specific legal grounds causing Satan, Leviathan, Cancer, and everyone else to be on their thrones, but you get rid of these grounds and their judgments of not being bound is over. So now they're actually able to finally be bound. Pray until the work is done, and send the angels that frustrates Leviathan. That way this being finally gets removed entirely. Intercede strategically for the body of Christ, nurse the body of Christ until the Holy Spirit too. Break legal grounds to take back what we willingly have given to the world, and watch the devil like he watches you, so he knows how annoying he is. How smart the devil's tactics. They're all forced to be taken away. Now you obviously have to do the work and stop taking their word for it, and just actually be able to be willing to accept that Christ's word is absolutely true. So obviously these individuals just have no hearts. You don't have to suffer them at all to live. You don't have to suffer them at all to continue in this witchcraft, to obviously be able to have individuals just be molesting other kids. You can hinder them, bind them, and finally kill them. You can pray simple prayers like that. So make sure they're all hindered and bound as well, as you're just hindering their problems and you're in the way. Well, not hindering their problems, you're hindering their plans, and you're in the way of their life, as these individuals are obviously a lot more evil than people think, where they actually, as soon as you actually begin doing this, they're going to throw everything that they can at you to ensure that they obviously continue molesting kids and doing other things like that. So obviously everything that they can is all your legal grounds they should actually have. Because that's what they can do. They can't do everything. The devil doesn't get to do everything he wants to do, and that's good. But Christ is clear when he said that you must obey the law of Moses in Matthew 5. Men in their own interpretations are the reasons why there is confusion in your life to begin with. Everyone has a pastor, and is not your pastor. Your pastor has a pastor, and it's Jesus Christ. That itself should automatically expose the fact that you can be 100% reliant on your pastor, and you still have to be 100% reliant on Jesus Christ himself. Although your pastor can give you words of wisdom and words of knowledge, he's not supposed to be your main source of life. He didn't die for your sins and other things like that. So you're not supposed to be 100% dependent on your pastor as if he was God himself. You're still supposed to be 100% dependent on Christ himself. If you would just isolate everything Christ said without letting any pastor influence your own decision, but only the Holy Spirit, these things are just clear and obvious. But the devil sends people to try to get you to stop being obedient to Christ's commands, and especially the law of Moses. Wanting to be obedient to God more is a fruit of being saved, and not just doing the bare minimum. So these things should become obvious now when anyone tries to stop you when you want to obey the law of Moses. And why do people care if you want to obey more? Because you love God. Regardless of anyone saying anything, you should automatically want to. But this should be common sense. But obviously, you listen to your pastor, you hear your pastor speak, and you're like, oh, wow, I just have just been corrected, I'm convicted, or whatever else that individuals just say to try to have some sort of comfort that we're all Christians, we're all in this, we're a family here. It's just a whole bunch of garbage. Your pastor's probably not even saved to begin with, and then you're over here, I feel convicted. Oh, he's definitely not saved. He's saying that you don't have to obey the law of Moses. Christ was clear in Matthew 5. Wanting to be obedient to God more is a fruit of being saved. And that's, obviously, your pastor doesn't really preach that, does he? And that's crazy in itself. And if you want to obey God more by obeying the law of Moses and Christ's commands, then do it, and don't let anyone stop you. But understand, not obeying means you are living in sin, because the law of Moses tells you what sin actually is. If the devil can remain hidden, then he will prosper, and this is no different. If you continue in sin and think that it is not because of the law of Moses, you will continue going through torment and rebukes. Your salvation and will get taken away, and you get taken away in the devil's eyes. Stop waiting for a response and fight back. Let go of your character and give it to Christ. Jesus Christ is real, and he can save you. Think of the moment before the suffrages happened. Cast out the legions, take away the kingdom of darkness, his authority of manipulation and control. As I'm convinced that demons do the stupidest and say the stupidest things in hopes you're not as stupid as the things that they say. An example is when they frantically yell no while being delivered. when you agreed to be delivered beforehand, and many more if you just view these things rationally and at face value. That was just if you just saw these things rationally, all the stuff that they were obviously doing inside of your life, and honestly, you'd just be like, yeah, I'm not gonna fall for that. I'm not that stupid. Or if you just attribute it to a human being doing the same things that the demons are doing inside of your life, you'll be able to knock it off and get away from me and other things like that. That should be a practice in itself. They should begin practicing. You should start seeing these demons creeping around uh, inside of your room as another human being. You obviously get the authorities involved. In this case, you get the angels involved to finally get them out and away from you at all times, and from inside of you as well. If you saw these things as humanoid or human things that were inside of you or whatever, or like, oh, that reminds me of that guy, or just things like that, and you saw these demons in that same manner, obviously you wouldn't even let these things on you. You would just frown upon it and just let it go and just deliver yourself from it. But you obviously, they do have this demonic yoke on you where you just begin giving them so much power and authority where they have more power than they actually have, just because they've convinced you of it. And because they've convinced you of it, then obviously you don't really see anything wrong with it whatsoever. You're just like, whatever, this is just fine, and dandy. I don't really have to do anything about it. This is just my life, and whatever. But realistically, most of, if not all of the devil's tactics are completely stupid. And the devil is remaining hidden in your life when you are not obeying the law of Moses. You don't even think it's sin, and you're just like, whatever, let me just let this devil inside. There is no devil, there is no curse of being disobedient to the law of Moses. We're under grace. But I had to deliver myself from these curses themselves for for all time. As far back as I have to go back for individuals in my family tree who didn't actually obey the law of Moses, as these individuals were cursed by God himself. I have to break those curses up as far back as I have to. And yeah, you're over here I don't have to. There's no curse with the law of Moses, and it's just like, whatever, and just let the blind be blind and just move on. I didn't have a vision, but God gave this strategically hit destruction of abortion clinics being bombed and turned into a heap of ruins to a woman. She thought it was in the first 7, but obviously the vision is about actually fighting the demonic headquarters of abortion clinics by binding the ones directing their abominations and loosing enough warring angels to actually fight and beat them down all across the globe to finally get them out of the way. You must break all grounds through the cross, causing these abortion issues to remain, or they're just going to say we have grounds to stay. You could put cancer, or the beast of Revelation 13, or persecution, or Babylon, or pride and murder, or my personal favorite, the satanic church and world and the Antichrist in its place, and these issues can be all taken out of the way once and for all. So pray until the work is done, as it will not be a quick fix, but you will win because they are forced to leave since there are no grounds. On what grounds are they still around? None. You just obviously have to fight. Deliverance from this cancer affecting everyone and plaguing the earth, but it's spiritual warfare. Do not be gullible. They have learned nothing they can teach God, so relax. Christ will give you new strategies to be able to teach them. And obviously you should also be hitting their satanic schools in the second heaven as well. As these individuals are going into the spiritual realms, they're going into the second heaven. If you could do that, they can do that as well with no problem. And so you just put that in its place. How you're binding the ones directing the abomination of the satanic schools and loosen the warring angels to actually fight and beat them down all across the globe to finally get them out of the way and to finally be able to and to be able to bind these demons up in these judgments of themselves after breaking all the legal grounds themselves. So this woman obviously had a vision that somebody was, that abortion clinics were all going, so it was the actual clinics themselves. So there, as everything is spiritual, there's there's a second heaven. So in the second heaven itself, there's obviously a demonic principality of abortion, and I'm sure this principality in itself, or this demonic prince, or whatever it is, whatever rank it has, obviously networks and works in all the neighboring towns as well to have more abortion clinics. That way, more judgments end up actually happening in America and all across the globe and all across the earth. So that's essentially what's happening. You're actually hitting them in the heavenlies, and now obviously you could send destruction, poverty, and other things to these abortion clinics themselves to ensure that they obviously do end up getting closed down, and they're finally taken out of the way. So so these things in themselves are just pretty easy to recognize and to see, but you actually have to just apply everything else that I've been talking to about these actual what I've been mentioning. Is there are demonic principalities for Walmart. There are demonic presences that are the chiefs, just like how every Walmart has a manager or a supervisor or whatever. These individuals just have the same exact type of thing, and they have, but it's a chief prince, or it's just a prince, or it's whatever, a chief in itself. So you have to hit them in the heavenlies first, hit them with destruction, poverty, and everything else, just to ensure that they obviously are finally taken out of the way, and they're obviously forced to pack their bags up and go. And you just continue hitting these places day in and day out until they're finally out of the way, as well as just applying these things with satanic schools, satanic churches, the satanic agenda, the Antichrist, and the world itself in its place, and these issues can all be taken away once and for all. As individuals need to start thinking for themselves and stop letting others influence your own decisions and bettering yourself, or even wanting to obey Christ more. It is time to grow up, as people latch onto the first bit of information as they come across when coping with certain situations, and continue living these things out for the rest of their life, being rewarded for their disobedience and iniquities, and wondering why they are aging, getting rebuked, and other common scenarios. Some people don't want to get better. They want others to confirm they are right, or to encourage their destructive behaviors. For individuals who have been doing this their entire life, it becomes a lot more difficult to get them to admit they need more help than you think. These things are a lot simpler to see, that if you were a lot less, if you were a lot more prudent, you would never fall into sin. Do you think Christ was gullible? If you had the mind of Christ, you'd never fall into sin. As people typically say, how can you be so forgiving? I'd never let anyone do that to me, but they let demons walk all over them. Don't let anyone stop you from doing good. It is a virtue to not let any demons around you, near you, or in you. So obviously that's a virtue that you obviously should be loosing inside of your vessel, to ensure that obviously are not letting any of these things near you, around you, or in you. You getting worse is you being in sin. You should be adding graces to graces, not iniquities, which cause rebukes, and is the reason you are getting worse to iniquities. Address the situations and prioritize addressing situations, and loose the graces to be even able to deliver yourselves, and loose the more excellent way in your vessels for everything. And loose strategic graces inside of your vessel as well, as these strategic graces are obviously going to help you in the long run. They're going to help you be a more efficient disciple of Jesus Christ, as you're already broken up all the little grounds themselves. So they just get canceled out, replaced, and kicked out. So these things are a lot more simpler to see. If you had the mind of Christ, you obviously would never have fallen into sin. But some of these things just require you actually being prudent, as all of it is 100% avoidable. But this is, I just spoke about that just because individuals are still, in that way of thinking where they don't really think for themselves. You're seriously going to have to think for yourself at one point of your life where you're going to have to stop letting another individual influence your decision on actually wanting to escape the lake of fire and actually wanting to be saved, or your decision to actually want to be with Jesus Christ forever and just actually be able to grow up and to actually get in that way of thinking where you actually are thinking for yourself, you're thinking about bettering yourself and doing what's best for you without anyone's opinion or influence or anyone influencing your decisions whatsoever. That's just something that individuals need to have inside of their minds. That's a virtue in itself, where they have to stop letting individuals obviously influence their decisions and influence them at actually wanting to better themselves. And this could apply to anything, but obviously go big or go home. You should just apply it to actually you being saved, as well as with coping skills and in situations. As individuals are like, wow, how could you be like that? You could just so forgiving. How could you be so forgiving? And just things like that. People just obviously are being used by the devils in ignorance to prevent you from actually being able to forgive another individual. And they try to get inside of your head, they try to get you proud, they try to do this and they try to do that. So obviously you can see at face value what is actually happening, that these individuals are obviously being manipulated and used by the devils in ignorance, and because of that these individuals are obviously coming inside of your life, harassing you, bombarding you. Why do they care? It's not their life. All of a sudden they're going to care about that life because you want to get saved. That's not the case whatsoever. Those demons are agitated and they're trying to stop you 100% from ensuring that you obviously don't forgive this individual, and you don't finally let go, you don't get saved, or you don't do this or you don't do that, and other things like that. So it's pretty easy to recognize and to see once you actually hear these types of messages, and once you actually recognize and you see that nobody should be stopping you from wanting to better yourself, wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be a mechanic or anything like that. But why do individuals just care? These individuals are obviously being used by the devils themselves. They're being puppeteered and in ignorance. So you're obviously interceding for the individuals who you're going to interact with for that day is 100% necessary. Just because it's not that it's going to solve you a lot of problems, but obviously you shouldn't let the demons themselves obviously puppet another person who you're going to come into contact with just because you actually know what is happening. You don't let another individual bully another person. This is the same exact thing that is obviously happening. You don't let these individuals obviously puppeteer the individuals who you're going to interact with just because it's flat out wrong and it's evil, and these individuals don't know what is actually happening. Unless some of these individuals are ignorant. And they're not ignorant. Some of these individuals are, some of these individuals are not. But definitely focus on the virtue in itself of not letting any single demon around you, in you, or near you. And put that to practice and just bind it loose. And bind these tempters up ahead of time, all day. Why fasting works? It works because you humble your soul and God stops resisting you as Leviathan and other factors were causing you to be resisted. And just in general, it is good to humble yourself down lower and lower, as it helps you recognize your real littleness in Christ's eyes and how little you actually are to Christ. So it is deliverance from Leviathan and intercession for yourself or others. As evil as these things I've mentioned are actually happening, everything is more or less pacified. They don't fight and fight the bigger battles and say things like, well, it's just the world I have to live in until Christ returns when you have to fight. So that in itself obviously just applies to it. Fasting, that's why fasting works, is because it humbles your soul down. And obviously you're not going to be resisted anymore because you took these things out of the way. You just kept humbling yourself down over and over and over until finally, obviously, God stopped resisting you. Your prayers were obviously answered, and your prayers were obviously heard. But this deliverance in itself, fasting works, deliverance works. Fasting in itself is 100% deliverance. That's pretty common knowledge. Individuals just have that whenever they want to deliver themselves from anything, they just have to fast. So humble yourself down, break the legal grounds of Leviathan himself. Even Satanists and people in the secular light know that God exists, but they are trying to point you in the direction that they are in strictly to destroy souls. Everyone in the secular light believes this truth except those directing it. It's completely evil and gullible on the population's end, but these messages get out and everyone mocks and scoffs at the people who are giving this message out. And given that this is the end times, this is a generation that will finally remove the dominion of Babylon, Leviathan, immorality, lust, cancer, and every other enthroned evil. So send the angels that frustrate these principalities and pray until the fight is done. Get rid of the demon kings in your vessel, as well as the chief princes and princes and their higher-ups. And think ahead and loose the good kings in your vessel before the evil one comes in, or the situations even arise ahead of time. And the kings attributed to the gifts and the fruits of the Holy Spirit, loose inside of your vessel. I don't want you being ignorant or naive to think that even after you've broken all grounds up, they may still resist you, or they won't resist you, so you're going to have to light them up to ensure that they leave and never come back. Demons know they are deceiving you, so just because they know they're deceiving you themselves, obviously you should just look at it at face value and just tell them to knock it off and just leave you alone. And to loosen those graces up inside of yourselves, to actually be able to accept that, to actually be able to put that to practice. Although they can tell the truth, more often than not, they are lying, so take Christ's words for what is actually happening, as the devil has legal grounds that are causing him to not be bound up, and break them all up. And even if you don't think you have hit the biggest challenges because you're already doing it, do it anyway. To appease Christ himself is by you having faith, and this includes obviously healing, as you do not need to jump through hoops or do backflips, but have faith just to see if you can and heal. Obviously, the more you work it out, the more miraculous the healing, so you must practice. So this is going to be, just because this is the last generation, obviously this is going to be the generation that actually ends up getting these enthroned evils off their throne and into the abyss. As you're already broken the legal grounds up for these individuals is to actually be enthroned. So now they're obviously forced to leave, and they're going to be thrown in the abyss, reserved with everlasting chains for judgment to be thrown in the lake of fire. So now they're out of the way, but you're going to have to intercede strategically for these individuals to ensure that they obviously don't have a place whatsoever in individuals' lives, and they're 100% done and out of the way. So at face value, you must be praying until the work is done, because this is not going to be a quick fix whatsoever. These evils have been around. These are ancient evils, and they've been around for long periods of time. So obviously these things are going to be or you just take Christ's word for it. You have enough legions. The whole host of heaven itself is obviously fighting against these enthroned evils and fighting to actually remove them off their thrones, to actually place good principalities in his place, and good kings also in his place. As something else that I've noticed as well, as individuals do have, they don't just have princes, they have chief princes, and they don't just have chief princes, they actually have kings inside of their vessel, but they don't want to admit these types of things, because they don't actually admit that they actually have these problems themselves. They're just pacified, and they're not bothering actually letting it go, or letting these things obviously they don't think that they have to actually be able to. They don't have to let any of these things go themselves. So that's pretty crazy in itself for these individuals to be able to recognize uh, and to see that you actually have to admit that you have these kings inside of your vessel. You have to admit that you need more help than you think, or you're not actually going to get the help. You can't live in denial with any of these things because you're not going to get the help that you need. You can't live in denial about you actually having kings inside of your vessel, or you're never going to get the help that you need. So you have to man up, address these situations, confront these issues, and obviously break the legal grounds up there causing these kings to be inside of your life, and loose the graces to ensure, well, loose the kings that are contrary to loose the kings that are actually going to prevent. And just think ahead in all honesty, just because eventually you're gonna hit that checkpoint in your life where obviously these kings are gonna have some sort of legality. You're more susceptible to the lies and other things like that. So think ahead, loose these graces ahead of time, and just ensure that you obviously are just thinking ahead. You're avoiding these avoidable situations. But you just don't want to actually avoid it. You want to wait until it actually happens for you to actually take action, for you to actually fight back. So all these things themselves, the kings, the chief princes, and the princes, all of it is 100% avoidable. As there's even chief princes that you've never heard of and never even thought of that are already inside of your life that you need to get rid of. And you need to prevent yourself from actually falling victim to the traps of these chief princes and princes themselves. When that's the Holy Spirit, what else he wants to say? He says thinking ahead, being prudent is absolutely vital and necessary for every individual who is in the body of Christ. Just to avoid the unnecessary suffrages and to avoid the unnecessary, all of it is just 100% avoidable. Just off that principle alone, it's just I need to be applying that to my life more persistently and more diligently and more consistently rather, just because it works. If I could avoid these situations through my legal grounds that Christ himself has given me, then obviously I might as well just put it to work and actually use it to my own advantage. I'm not going to let it go to waste. I'm going to milk the most out of it and definitely make the most out of it as well. So think ahead. Think ahead. For all types of stuff, and just actually look at the long list of kings that Christ himself already knows that you could lose inside of your vessel, and loose them all inside of your vessel. Clear the skies, fight, and as well as getting all the kings that are inside of your vessel on the list according to the actual situation, and judge that situation according to what is actually happening. Stop letting these devils define deliverance. Stop being so gullible and thinking that you finally got the chief princes out when you haven't really gotten them out. Stop being naive to think that these beings and everyone in the secular life is not as evil as they are, or as they try to cover up. Fight. Give it to Christ. Focus on the kingdom of light and the kingdom of heaven, and loose those graces on those kings inside of your vessel, and princes and chief princes. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Don't forget that the entire host of heaven is fighting against the kingdom of darkness, so you're obviously going to win. If you're already broken up all the legal grounds themselves and they still try to resist you, and just light them on fire or tell an angel to stab it and to poke it and to stab it with a knife until they finally leave. If they try to lay low or they are laying low, then stab it, light it on fire. Excuse me. Light it on fire and yeah, just get it out of the way. Just because I've already been through that already, where I already broken up all the legal grounds, obviously curses, the loopholes, and everything else, and they still would not leave until I lit them on fire, or I told the angel to stab it, and they finally left. So these things are serious. Think ahead, pray, give it to Christ. Stop being naive. Loose those graces up and loose, as well as everything else that I mentioned. I pray that those graces are loosed inside of your vessel to ensure that you actually are not relying on yourself, you actually are relying on grace. For any work and any good work that you obviously want to do. I pray that those graces are loose inside of your vessel, as well as just words of knowledge and the graces that come with it, and that's a grace in itself. Be loose inside your vessel for you not to actually be able to define sin, and for you to not actually define sin as well. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Or not even to define anything, to loose those graces up inside your vessel. That way you're not defining anything, you're letting Christ define everything. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Fight. Don't forget about the missing children and the networking that's happening in the kingdom of darkness. Hit the bottom of the iceberg and break the legal grounds up for everything that is in the bottom of the iceberg to finally get these things out of the way. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Thank you. Have a good day.